Hello. We're going to wait a few more minutes to see if anyone else joins live.
Great, thanks.
So I want to take this moment and welcome everyone to the call. My name is Rebecca Landrio, and I'm the CEO of Apex Aesthetic Consulting. I'm looking forward to sharing all of my industry knowledge over the course of this call. I will do a short presentation. I don't like slide decks. I don't like anything like that. So it will just be me talking, and then I will open up for questions. I did want to let everyone know that the meeting is being recorded and transcribed. So I will send out the recording and also a link to my YouTube channel where all of my previous webinars and podcast appearances are already up for anyone to view. So just first things first, I wanted to introduce myself. I have been in the industry for almost 20 years. I began as a clinic manager and a laser clinician myself, as well as a licensed esthetician, at which point I transitioned to clinical training on the laser side and also spent nearly a decade selling aesthetic lasers as a laser sales rep for 3 different companies in the industry, servicing the Midwest as a district sales manager. So, my experience as a clinic manager, as a clinical trainer, as a sales rep, and now as a consultant really is full circle. The real reason for me starting this business, becoming a consultant, is really because of the direction that I saw a lot of the companies in their industry going in, especially the laser companies. And it got to the point where myself, as a person who lives with integrity in my sales process, it just didn't feel really as if the laser companies are servicing the people that they're supposed to be servicing, which is ultimately the clinicians who are purchasing these devices and using them to provide good clinical outcomes for their patients and for the patients themselves, of course, receiving the treatment. So we'll talk a little bit about what it is that brought me here over the course of kind of this no BS guide to the laser industry secrets. I'm going to let everyone know up front, while this is recorded and while it will be public, I'm not comfortable talking specifically about my experiences with certain devices or with the companies that I've worked for in this setting. However, I'm very open in one-on-one calls. And I will talk a little bit about what that looks like at the end of this call, so that anyone attending and who has registered for the webinar can get a complimentary call with me one-on-one to discuss really the specifics of purchasing a laser for your own practice. I do have some questions that were delivered to me in the registration. So once I go through my quick kind of top 10 mistakes that I see a lot of practice owners make and how to prevent making those mistakes, I will talk about the questions that have already been presented to me, and then I will open up for any additional questions live. So, this is not a sales pitch. I'm going to be very clear. I don't work for any laser companies anymore. I haven't for over 18 months. I don't recommend any laser company or any laser over others. It really is so dependent on each individual practice. What is the right device and the right company to work with for you? And, that's partially why I feel like this webinar is so important, because the information that you all get in these meetings from these reps or when you go to conferences, it's really hard to distinguish what is the truth and what is or is not predatory in this process, because the only person that you may be talking to is somebody from that company or somebody from that company's boss, or maybe a competitive rep, and you're hearing two very different things and it seems like it's all contradictory. That is the problem with the industry. And there's a lot of bad actors, both as companies and the reps that are out there. And so it's really hard to discern what is true and what is not true. So that's, really where I'd like to start with today. So I want everyone to understand why this decision is so critical. It really impacts every layer of your business, because if you are, especially a first-time laser purchaser, I think you don't know what you don't know. And we're not pulling back the veil as reps to give you what the possible roadblocks to your success could be, because we're not looking to add any objections to the sales process. We are trying to get you to sign for the laser as fast as possible and hope you don't regret your decision. And so we make it out to be very easy. We make it out to be as if, you buy the device and it's going to create a bat signal. And especially if you're a newer practice, or you're somebody who may be a non-core, like an OBGYN or a family practice provider that's looking to add aesthetics into an existing business, you may or may not have the operational processes already in place that are going to make a purchase like this to be the right decision for you. And so often we are just listening to what the sales rep tells us will be our return on investment with such a high ticket purchase. And these are very high risk investments. I mean, typically, if you're looking to purchase a brand new laser, you're probably looking at 75,000 to 150, upwards of 200 or 300,000 with some of the really high ticket devices that are out on the market. And, the right choice for a laser can expand your services, can elevate your brand, can drive your ROI. But I can tell you that the wrong device will collect dust and will likely bankrupt you. I have heard stories all across the country, and I've experienced it myself, even as a clinical manager. We purchased a technology almost 20 years ago that was really new to the space. We made a lot of promises about the clinical efficacy of the treatment, a lot of promises about how easy the treatment would be to perform. And in the end, it was a difficult treatment to perform. It had a very high consumable cost. It was uncomfortable for the patient to receive. And nobody felt clinically confident because the training fell short. And in the time that I was that clinic manager, that $150,000 device probably got used 2 or 3 times. And I used to say that it was the most expensive coat hanger we had ever bought, and it was because, I think due diligence wasn't done. And that is usually the first mistake that everybody makes. The most common mistake that I want to bring up first is not doing your due diligence about what it is that your sales rep has presented to you. Now, you know, we all know that laser reps are hunters. These people are, I used to joke that we're like assassins. We are meant to show up at your door, convince you to take a meeting with us, maybe spend 5 minutes pitching something that's the next greatest, best thing that's ever existed, get you convinced to give us another meeting that's a little bit longer. Maybe then we bring in the guy that's the level above us. He's like the closer. We're convincing you to fill out a credit application. We're convincing you to sign a quote. And you're never given the opportunity to ask any questions. And any questions that you do ask are going to easily be brushed off by the rep, because we're all trained to handle all of these objections. And the honest to goodness truth is that you do need to do your due diligence about what a device does, whether or not it has an FDA 510K clearance, whether or not it's in your scope of practice to have that device, and or whether or not it can be delegated. The number one thing that we are trained to tell you is even a monkey can run this device. It's that easy. You can delegate it to anyone. You're going to get 30 patients a month. You're going to pay this device off in 3 months. Those are all things that are drilled into laser reps' heads to say that will sometimes get us to forget what the important questions are. What is the modality we're actually talking about? Is this a gold standard wavelength for what we're trying to achieve? So to break this down a little bit more simply, I would say if we're talking about something like a typical vascular or pigmentation laser that we're trying to purchase, and the thing that we decided is the right fit for our practice at this time, most of our IPL photofacials or some sort of vascular and pigment reduction, maybe something like an Nd:YAG or a vascular laser may be able to correct, or maybe a Q switch for pigment, right? If the device that is being sold to us is a device that is supposed to be for pigment and for vascularity, then you need to look deep down at the specs and make sure that the device is of the wavelength that is the gold standard. I think what people forget is that many of these lasers and these technologies have been around 30 to 50 years. Something like an IPL 500 to 800 nanometer various wavelengths are going to treat different layers of pigment and different layers of vascularity, as is, a Q switch or a Pico going to treat pigment, as is a 1064 going to treat vascularity. If the device isn't using those wavelengths, then they're just telling you that it's going to treat pigment and vascularity with no clinical proof and with no FDA clearance. Same thing goes for, say, skin tightening. And this is probably my favorite, or body contouring. And when I say my favorite, I mean it is what is racked with the most lies. Because inevitably, there's going to be these new technologies that come out, or new wavelengths, or new devices, and they are not necessarily the gold standard for what we're looking to achieve, at the clinical endpoint we're looking to achieve. So if you're looking at some sort of device, and it might be monopolar RF, or it might be bipolar RF, and there's within the specs of the device, it's not getting to a certain temperature in the skin, it's not going to create that skin tightening effect. The laser companies can slap anything that they really want onto these boxes, but the specs will not lie. The FDA 510 clearance will not lie. So it's imperative that we do our due diligence during that process to say, send me your 510K clearance. You go to the FDA website, look for the 510K clearance. Be certain that, one of the things that I have found to be the most interesting when I speak with a lot of providers is, I have had a number of providers who have had a laser rep from a certain company pitching a certain device. And, this specific device is being touted as being safe for Fitzpatrick's 1 through 5, and it's not safe. And it may be that we have settings that we're dialing down super, super low, but below clinical efficacy to make it safe, to be able to treat a darker Fitzpatrick type, but ultimately the 510K clearance of that specific modality in this instance is actually, it's a CO2 device, and if you understand laser physics, you know that CO2 devices are not intended for darker Fitzpatrick types, whether or not you can dial the energy all the way down. Just because someone could be treated safely doesn't mean we're also treating them to the clinical endpoint that the device is promising. So at the same, again, you're sacrificing your reputation as a provider by pitching something that a device is not doing. So you need to be sure that whatever it is that they're pitching to you, that the device is capable of doing that. So I think that's the most important thing, is that we skip our research. We don't ask any questions to our reps, because we take what they say as being the word, and it's not. I mean, I have heard reps say, yes, you can absolutely do that procedure, and this is to an esthetician, and it's a device where we need to do an incision and insert a cannula. There's not a state in the United States, and yes, not all of them are the same. There's not one state in the United States where an esthetician is going to be able to perform a procedure. That is the practice of medicine. And, I don't know if it's that the reps don't know. I think often it's that they're just telling people what they want to hear to make the sale. So you have to do your due diligence to make sure whatever device that they are pitching has, is going to do what they say that they do. Some of the things, what I would encourage a lot of people to do, if you've never researched laser before, and I have resources like this available for purchase and for download, is to really just understand laser physics 101. What is the difference between diode, YAG, erbium, CO2, the newer wavelengths that are somewhere in between, these hybrid wavelengths that are now available, where we're doing both a superficial resurfacing and a deeper resurfacing with a couple of different wavelengths. What is ultrasound? What is EMF? What is HIFU? There's just all of these technologies that are out there. And if you don't know what that device is intended to do, then you are at the mercy of what they tell you. So I think that that's really important. You want to compare, you want to really understand what all the different laser wavelengths are. I get very concerned about people who have gone to these trainings or conferences that are put on by the laser companies, because those are just giant timeshare presentations for laser services. Yes, they're going to roll out the red carpet. We're going to have cocktail hours. We're going to have a bunch of people that are going to be up on stage talking about how successful this device was for them, and they may be key opinion leaders. They may be your peers, and you're like, I really trust what that person says. They've got a great social media following, but ultimately they are often paid by the laser companies to get up and say exactly what they're saying. They may or may not even be using the device in their own practice. Often the MDs or the owners that are up there are just delegating those treatments away to somebody else. They don't really know if it's that effective. They don't really know if the patients are happy with the service. So it's just this dog and pony show of, what I like to call plans. I mean, you could be sitting at a dinner table with somebody who tells you that they're also interested in purchasing a device, but what they don't tell you is they've already bought 4 or 5 devices from that company before, and now they're there to sit with you at lunch to talk about how much they like it, to make you feel like, oh, well, this peer of mine is the one who is, telling me that this is great, not the rep. Well, all of those things are, like I said, it's a dog and pony, it's smoke and mirrors. So, I would encourage people, you could certainly go to these types of presentations, but do not make decisions to purchase a device while at one of those events. They are meant to get you into a room. It's like the war room, and they're meant to get you one-on-one and to give you the device deal of a lifetime. And it doesn't give you the opportunity to do your due diligence. So a couple of red flags, really vague treatment claims about what the device can do.
Yes,
something like FDA pending, or if they use a phrase like FDA approved, medical devices cannot be FDA approved. FDA approval strictly for prescription medication. Laser device needs to be 510K cleared, has to be FDA cleared. That language gets misused often. And again, if a rep doesn't know the difference between an FDA clearance and FDA approval, I would be doing my due diligence to make sure that that device is safe for you to be using. The other thing to be considerate too is unrealistic before and afters. I mean, if we see, I will retire on the fact that there is just not one device out there that's going to give someone surgical-like results in terms of tightening, lifting, body contouring, resurfacing, that is going to be the same as a surgical facelift with a full field ablative CO2 while a patient is under anesthesia. If the device that they're showing you is providing results like that and they're telling you it's non-invasive or able to be delegated, I would be very concerned, because if we knew that that was coming, if that technology already existed, we'd be putting plastic surgeons out of business, and that's not ever going to happen. So it's going to be a very, very long time before we can get results from these energy-based devices that are going to be the same as the surgical precision of a plastic surgeon and some of these really intense laser treatments. So, the next mistake is not really understanding the total cost of ownership and thinking strictly about the sticker price. So something that is often not going to be disclosed to you unless you dig deep and ask these questions specifically is, what are we looking at for total cost of ownership for the lifetime of having the device outside of whatever you tell me the list price of the device may be? Something that may not be indicated right off the bat, maybe a consumable or disposable cost associated with something. So we all know with device where breaking sterility is an issue, like a radiofrequency microneedling device, or something else where, it would obviously require something to be disposed. That's the cost of doing business with devices like that. You can't really get around having to replace a tip on a radiofrequency microneedling device. I really struggle with the companies out there that have a consumable cost that is something like you have to buy pulses or a USB or a card, or they turn your device off because your pulses have expired. All of those things are just profit sharing mechanisms of the laser companies to destroy your return on investment. It's, a treatment like that, you have to really think about what, if you're having to pay for something that's not a disposable tip, if you're having to pay for swipes or pulses or whatever you might want to call it, every single time you run that device, your margins are smaller and smaller. So that's just something to consider. And a lot of times those things aren't disclosed. The other thing is handpiece replacements. You will hear me talk a little bit later in both the answer to some questions and also some other things that have been posed to me in the questions in the past. What about these devices that have a bunch of different handpieces? I personally love a platform device. I think that's one of the best devices that someone can invest in initially, because you're giving yourself a lot of versatility and a lot of different treatments with one single box versus purchasing a device that might be at an equivalent cost but only have one single treatment. But what we don't realize is that those handpieces do need to be replaced. And often, in every company I've worked for, the replacement of those handpieces is not covered in your service plan. It's not covered in your warranty. That's the other thing that often will not be disclosed either. You may only have, you might be given the list price and told that you get 1 year of warranty included, and they don't tell you what the cost of maintaining that warranty is. I have worked for companies where a service plan on a device has been as low as $5,000 a year. I've worked for companies where service plans on devices have been as high as $25,000 a year. If you do not know that up front, then you are doing yourself a big mistake, because that in terms of what you're paying your device off and becoming profitable, if you have to make an additional $25,000 purchase year over year to maintain the device, then it's going to take you longer to realize your profitability. Additionally, staff training costs. I think you will be made a lot of promises about how wonderful clinical training will be and how they're going to do everything to make sure that you are trained up and ready to go as soon as that device is delivered into your practice. Realistically, you're going to get a trainer who's going to come out. They may be a very capable trainer. I was a trainer. But I will tell you, we are beholden to train you on exactly what the company tells us to train on. We cannot teach you anything off label. We can't talk about stack modalities. And we're going to come in, and especially in these devices that have a lot of different hand pieces or offer a lot of different services, it could be having, I mean, your staff could be like drinking out of the fire hose. I mean, if we've never touched a laser before and all of a sudden we're doing laser physics 101, we're talking about clinical endpoints on 5 or 6 different wavelengths, pre and post treatment considerations and contraindications for 5 or 6 different treatments. And we're packing that into a PowerPoint and 3 models in a 6-hour day. I can tell you with absolute certainty, your team will not be clinically confident and will very likely either be under treating your patients out of fear and that lack of clinical confidence, or you are cruising for an adverse event. And so you need to understand they will not support you once that clinical training is done. They will send you that piece of paper. The trainer might give you the cell phone number. She might answer he or she might answer a few questions afterwards, but they are not going to be there to support you when you down the line. They're not going to send a clinical trainer to fly in when you hire somebody new. They're going to tell you, oh, well, that's $3,500. That's $5,000. I'll send you a quote and you can purchase that training. So understand that if you want to be the best, you either have to pay for third-party laser training or you have to continue to pay to have these trainers come out so that everyone has the absolute tip-top clinical confidence. Because I think the whole idea that these devices are so easy a monkey could run them is one of the greatest fallacies. Laser technology can be very dangerous, and it's also as easy to clinically undertreat. And nothing is worse than selling a patient on a very expensive laser package and then not meeting their clinical expectations. So you have to consider the cost of the person who's going to be running your device, the cost of your tip, the ongoing cost of maintenance, and factor all of those things in. And it very quickly, a $200,000 laser becomes a $600,000 all-in cost. And, I'd like to ask if you think that you can sell $600,000 in laser packages before that device is paid off. And I would argue that in the highest volume of practices I've ever been in, that is not typical. So it's just something I'd like to warn people on. I'm going to run really quickly through some of these next few because I do want to make sure that we save time for Q&A. But, the predatory sales tactics, I've already mentioned it before, but the number one thing that I would really encourage people not to do is not to fill out the credit application to find out what you qualify for if the laser company is not upfront and clear about what the device costs. When they say something to you along the lines of, well, let me see what you qualify for. Let me see if you fit into this promo that we're doing. What they're doing is they're determining the cost of that laser based on how much you qualified for. So a really strong, well-qualified buyer may be told that you're approved for the full 150. We got you this great rate. We'll throw in a $10,000 discount and, we're good to go. Here, sign here. And then the place down the street may not be as well qualified of a buyer, maybe not in business as long, maybe a non-core, whatever it might be. Oh, they only qualify for $99,000 in financing. Well, that same person down the street will get that laser for $99,000 that you were charged $150 for because that's what you were qualified for. I want a quote with a price before we ever fill out a credit application. And I would only want to fill out a credit application for the amount that you're looking to finance for the device. Now, speaking of financing, I think that the underbelly of this industry really is the predatory financing. Old laser rep me is rolling over in her grave when I tell you, if you do not qualify to purchase a device from your own bank, if your own bank that you do your business banking through will not provide you with a line of credit or with a loan to purchase this equipment because they don't believe that your finances are going to cover that high of a payment, then you need to walk away. You need to wait until you can afford it because the device manufacturer, the capital equipment financing companies that are out there, by and large, I'm not saying 100% all of the time, but I am saying 95% of the time, have extremely predatory lending tactics. It could mean, and often your loan paperwork will be, maybe a single sheet. It's not putting a lot of disclosures. They're not giving you a payment schedule or amortization schedule. They're not disclosing what the interest rate is. You might say to the rep, oh, well, what's my interest rate? And they'll say, oh, let me ask the finance guy. And the finance guy came back and said it averages out to about 8%. Sure, it might average out to about 8%, but in the first couple of years of that loan, you may be paying 30, 40% interest. And they tell you, oh, there's no prepayment penalty. But what they fail to mention in most of these is, while there isn't a prepayment penalty for paying the loan off early, you're responsible for the entirety of the interest, even if you pay off early. They're predatory loans in a lot of cases. So if you do not have an attorney and a CPA or a financial advisor that can review these types of agreements with you in real time, I would encourage you not to be signing financing paperwork from a lot of these lenders. Again, I would look at alternative means of financing. There's often undisclosed balloon payments, high residual interest after 3 months, no interest, or whatever promos. 0% financing is never 0% financing. So I would encourage people to be, if you are going to go with one of their lenders, then be fully aware that you're going to be paying extremely inflated interest, especially in today's economy. So if you are ready, right? So now we're the ideal buyer. We've done our research. We've decided that, our patient base is large enough to sustain, getting the profitability from this laser purchase. We know that, all of our patients are getting IPL and laser hair removal and laser resurfacing down the street because you're only doing injectables. And, now we're ready to bring that device in. Our bank has financed it for us. We've made all of these great decisions. How do you future-proof your investment? And, a couple of things that I would say is making sure that you start broad and specialize later. One of the things this is kind of when I talked about these platform devices. I've worked for 3 laser companies, all of whom have sold platform devices. Every company I've worked for, we kind of call them a med spa in a box. They really are intended to be, kind of that one device that you bring in and you're able to treat a wide variety of patients without specializing in a very niche specific treatment. So things like body contouring, surgical devices where, that device I mentioned where we're making an incision and we're inserting a cannula and we're doing laser assisted liposuction in the face. I would never buy devices like that as your first device purchase. You want to be able to cast a wide net to your patient base and say, look, I'm now offering all of these services. Come and get these from me. And when we offer really highly specialized or niche treatments, we really narrow the field of who we can sell these treatments to. So I would say, I would start broad and specialize more later. Now, that's not the case for everybody. I mean, it may be if you are specifically a weight loss practice and you're not really doing general aesthetic medicine, or then maybe a body tightening sculpting device to treat your GLP-1 patients who have loose skin, like maybe that is the right purchase for you. Maybe that makes the most sense with your treatment offerings. But that's not, in general, if you are doing general aesthetics and you are maybe an injectable heavy practice, maybe you have an esthetician doing some skin services, then I would look at what the natural progression is. What are we having trouble? What hole do we currently have in our service offerings that will be fit with the device? Is it that everybody's going, I wish I could do this. I wish we could pull this up. And we're doing filler and we're doing threads and we're just not getting that lift. Okay, we need to talk about a device that's going to do lifting and tightening. You have patients who are younger and they're doing prejuvenation, but we're coming in with a lot of sun damage and a lot of IPL or a lot of vascularity. Then we need to look at, your IPL type modalities. Maybe we're looking at building collagen, then maybe our radiofrequency microneedling might be the right device for you. But I would be looking very, very closely at your patient demographic and what hole you can fill in that service menu before you make a decision about a device. I wouldn't create an entirely new service pathway thinking that it's going to bring new patients in your door. I would look at what you aren't currently offering the patients you have, because those are going to be the ones that are going to convert to your services. They're your quote unquote low hanging fruit. So let's talk a little bit about compliance and regulations. This is the other thing that I think a lot of times, again, the laser reps may or may not be completely transparent on. I've had a conversation in the last 6 months with at least 5 offices who've had a device delivered to their practice. And then the clinical trainer has tried to reach out to schedule training. And in one instance, it was, oh, well, what's your medical director? What's your MD's name who will be attending the training? And this is an NP or a PA with independent practice authority, but in their specific state where they don't need a medical director, they don't need somebody to be overseeing their treatments, this specific device still only can be done by a medical doctor. So now we've made the effort to become a full practice authority, a PA or an NP, and we have, we are in charge of our own destiny, and we purchased this device, and now we can't even run the machine. And now we have to hire an MD for a very expensive cost to perform this specific treatment. I've had people be sold CO2s and not tell them that they're CO2s. CO2 treatments often cannot be delegated lower than a mid-level provider or a physician extender. It is very rarely allowed to be delegated to an esthetician or a laser technician in most states. But laser reps will tell you it's so easy, a monkey can run it, because we have these dialed down low settings. That does not mean that it's okay. Just because the settings are lower or are dialed down, that doesn't mean that it's within your scope of practice. So if you haven't done that diligence by talking with the medical board, the board of nursing, your cosmetology board in your state, you could buy a device that you are unable to operate. And let me be abundantly clear, they will not take that device back. The minute that you take delivery and it is in your practice, you will never hear from them again. You can threaten to sue, you can threaten to return the device, you will be stuck, especially if you finance with their finance company. So understand that the decision that you're making, you have to do all of that due diligence. I talked about this before with kind of the mistakes is skimping on training and support. I think one of the things that, because a lot of people say to me, how do I market my laser? I bought a laser, I launched it, and now no one in my practice is, or no one's getting the treatments done, and it's just collecting dust. So, usually when I do a consultation, the questions that I ask are, so the people that are in your practice that are doing these treatments, are they 100% clinically confident 100% of the time in every single treatment that you're offering? And the answer is almost always no. And one thing that providers are really excellent at is they're going to default to what they are the best at, because they know they can get a good clinical outcome. And if the treatment that they are trying to perform, they don't feel like they're getting a good clinical outcome, then they are very unlikely to recommend that treatment to their patients. So almost always there's a clinical confidence gap because the trainings are not sufficient, because we got a device with 6 hand pieces and 32 possible indications to treat in a 4-hour training the day after we bought the device. And we've never even done laser physics before. And we can't expect, this is not the fault of your team. It's not the fault of your clinicians. It's the lack of support and training from the laser companies. So, that's my first thing. Again, that's why we have to know ahead of the time, we have to be prepared to spend the money on that additional clinical training. The next step is, does the rest of your team, down to the people who mop your floors, I joke, but it's true, are they able to answer basic questions about these treatments with inbound inquiries? If you launch on your social media that you're offering this brand new device and it's got all of these clinical indications, and then somebody calls and says, oh my gosh, I'm so excited about your new laser, what is that treat? And our front desk staff goes, oh, I don't know. I didn't know we got a new laser. Do you want to make an appointment? Well, we understand, that's an operational gap where, again, we've purchased for the device and maybe now we're paying to market it, but our team, our support team, our non-clinical staff can't answer basic questions about the procedures, and no one is training them. You could maybe ask a rep to bring lunch and and train them. But again, you'll be hard pressed to find someone who's going to answer your call after the device has been purchased. And the running joke, and it's true, the best way to get rid of laser reps is to buy a laser. And it's unfortunate, but they are on to the next victim, if you will, because we are held to extremely high quotas and extremely aggressive corporate cultures. So, I don't believe that all reps are bad people, but I do believe that the culture in this industry has driven people to not offer the support they may even want to offer you, because they're already fine, that you might have signed on the line and now their sales manager saying, okay, when are you going to close the next purchase? And so they're running around trying to do that instead of helping you. I would say if your rep tells you that they are going to be there to support you, that is a number one huge red flag, because in the laser business, and some of you, I'm sure already know this because you probably had 24 people in your office in the last year, some of whom you're like, I think I got 2 or 3 business cards from this company already. The reality is it's extremely cutthroat. It's an extremely toxic culture. And so you will see rep turnover every 6 to 12 months in a lot of cases. So even if you fall in love with the rep, and you're like, I don't know, the device is okay, but I really love the rep, do not buy the device. That rep will not be there to support you. There are sometimes post-sales support people, especially with the companies that have consumables, that rep might be making commission on selling, like your cool cards or your microneedling tips or whatever it might be, or your whatever body contouring pads that they're selling you. But if you are not a high volume practice where they're making a lot of commissions, you also will not be at the top of their priority list to help either. It's very much the same as your very large injectable company says, you're too small peanuts for us, you have to place your order through customer service. It's going to be the same way. If you're not in the top 1 or 5% of the users of those consumables, your post-sales support will be probably, basically negligible. So do not make a decision to purchase a device if you feel like you're going to need the rep support for you to be successful, because they will not be there to support you in most cases. So final takeaways, right? And then I'll go to Q&A, but my final takeaways are the top mistakes that you have to avoid: lack of research and due diligence, underestimating the overall cost of ownership, falling victim to predatory sales tactics, utilizing predatory financing, purchasing devices that have limited versatility or limited upgrade capabilities, purchasing something that's non-compliant to your scope of practice, trying to get away with subpar training and effectively launch a device, and an over-reliance on reps. Those are all things that are a somewhat kind of dangerous road to go down. So I know that all kind of sounds very negative, and I don't want anyone to think that it means that no one should be purchasing a laser. I have seen very successful practices purchase and launch and be really successful with a lot of different devices from a lot of different manufacturers over the years. It's just, I want to be very clear that you have to be capable of doing this on your own with the operational processes that you currently have in place with your practice, or you need to talk to someone like me, where we're building out these operational processes, we're building out launch and marketing strategies. Because if you believe what the reps tell you and that you can purchase this device, drop it in your office, it's going to send out a bat signal, people are going to bang down your door, and you have no plan on how to make sure that we're not falling victim to those mistakes, then you will be in that situation where, it may be in a corner collecting dust. So I'll open up for Q&A now if anyone live has any questions. If I'm going to unmute. I guess you can use the little raise your hand icon if you have a question, or you can unmute yourself. Does anyone want to go first? And if we're too shy to ask questions by unmuting, you can always put a question in the chat box, and I'm happy to take a look at that, or in the Q&A box. And if not, then I'm going to pull up my questions that were asked in the registration form. I know for sure one of the things that was asked multiple times in the registration form was how to negotiate a better price for a laser. I did not talk about that in my presentation because I knew that this would be a question a lot of people would ask. Understand that every person you talk to at the laser company, whether it is their clinical person, their regional manager, the post-sales support, the guy who knocked on your door originally and brought you lunch, every single person in that company is trained to be a laser sales rep. And so their ultimate goal is to get you to sign that paperwork. I think what we need to understand is that whatever number they come at you with in terms of calling it a list price, most companies, not all, there are one or two that are very price transparent and they list their prices online and you know exactly what you're getting into prior to discussion. But 90% of the laser companies out there, and most of, I'd say the big five, do not list their prices anywhere. And a rep from New York, a rep from Chicago, a rep from Miami will tell you that that same device is $350,000, $300,000, $250,000 based on how they feel on that day. And then they have like a matrices of which they are looking at how much they can discount a device for you and to what threshold their commission that they'll get paid. So oftentimes the better, we will get better deals. And this is true at the end of the quarter and at the end of the year, because that rep might be willing to sacrifice a commission percentage point or two in order to make a deal, in order to make a sale, where they may not be willing to do at the beginning of the quarter or at the beginning of the year. Now, every company operates a little bit differently. Sometimes you can just say, you know, I know that that's, you know, 75% higher than what it should be. I want a $50,000 discount. I always say, just throw it at the wall and see what sticks. They're going to come back and tell you, oh, there's no way we can do that. And you need to be willing to walk away. It's very much like used car sales or like timeshare sales. You need to be willing to walk away. You can't be desperate. The ball really is in your court. I recommend everyone asking for things like an additional year of warranty included. I recommend everyone to ask for additional consumables to be included. Like, I want another box, you know, oh, it's coming with 10 tips. I want 50 tips. Oh, it comes with 1 year warranty. What will be 3? Add in an extra training. Say, I'm not going to pay for a secondary training. But again, alongside some of these kind of predatory sales tactics, do not take a rep's word for it, a rep's boss's word for it. It all needs to be in writing, in your contract, in the DocuSign, not on the quote that was handwritten, in the DocuSign, that all of those things are due to you. And then I would additionally have email communication up the chain, because I mean, I've some of the most disgusting stories, and one that I will, you know, there was a sales rep in my area for a company that sold a bunch of devices by telling everyone, telling them in meetings, so of course this wasn't in any kind of contract, that if it's not working out at the 1 year mark, we'll take the device back. There is not a company in the industry that will do that, not one. And he sold a bunch of devices, and a bunch of people didn't work out at a year. They go back. That rep's not with the company anymore. That's because he's already got his Maserati in his vacation home. And the CEO of the company says, we would never allow that. It's not in your contract. Well, and now we're stuck with these devices because we thought, oh, we have a year to make it work and they're going to take it back. So if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. So again, anything that you negotiate needs to be in writing. Most of the lasers that are $150,000 or more, you could negotiate probably $50,000 or more off of that. I can speak specifically to certain devices and certain companies in one-off calls. I did let everyone know at the beginning of the call, and I'll make sure I'm going to touch on it now so that I don't forget. You can go to my website, www.apexaestheticconsulting.com. Click on the services button. There is a laser readiness call that has a retail price on it. I'm offering everyone, if you want to do a one-on-one strategy call where it's just you and me and we can talk really candidly, I would schedule the free initial consultation strategy call that's at the top of that page. There will be no charge if you book me with that button. So anyone who wants to talk after this, we can talk specifically about your situations in terms of, any purchases you may be interested. I've negotiated on behalf of my customers a number of times in the past and be willing to do that for anyone on this call as well. My only ask is please do not book a free consultation until next week. My admin will be overwhelmed after this call if everybody books in the next couple of days. And I want to make sure that I do my due diligence with every strategy call. And anyone can book that on that free strategy call section. Okay. Another question that was asked in the registration was, how do I market my laser? I think that's a really broad question to ask. Again, if you're the person who's interested, you feel clinically confident, you feel that, your operational processes are completely in place, that you're compliant, and really all it is how should I get new clients with these treatments? I've sold to all of my existing patients. How do I get new patients? That's going to depend really largely on the practice, the demographic, your geographic location, and what device you have. So that really is a one-on-one call. But ultimately, I would say the number one way to get off on the right foot with marketing your device, and the best way, this really works too, with the best way to effectively use your clinical training that they are going to provide to you for you to be successful, is to, when you purchase that device and you get your couple of models to come in for the training, for that 3 or 4 weeks after the device has landed in your office, to do a model call for a number of providers or a number of patients at a pretty discounted rate, and do those treatments immediately after they've been trained, so that there is some of that muscle memory. And we've also, by default, we have a model contract that states, this was a discount because you're being used as a model for training. We're going to use all of your before and after pictures on our social media. We may ask you to do a testimonial. We'd like you to write a Google review and get a bunch of people and before and after pictures and reels and social content in that time between the device landing and your clinical training and kind of launching it, so that you have some of that content right off the bat. The laser companies will tell you that there's turnkey marketing in all of the portals. They're Canva templates. Take that as you will. I use Canva for my marketing. I'm not a graphic designer. I by no means claim to be. So what you see on my social is AI or Canva. But if you have a very specific colorway and brand story and all of those things to your social and to your marketing, then you can't rely on what's going to come in those marketing portals, because it will be extremely generic, and there'll be before and afters from other providers, and they won't be your patients. So that's all great in the beginning. You launch a flyer and throw it at your front desk that says now offering laser services. Great. You could probably print that from their portal. But if you're looking at a full suite of marketing that's going to match your branding or your colorway, you're not going to find it in those portals. We do have 5 minutes left. So for those that are live, I don't know if anybody, again, if you want to raise your hand or unmute yourself. Otherwise, I'm going to go back one more time and see if I missed any questions from the registration. Tomorrow at once I receive the recording of this call, I will send it to everybody, the link to my YouTube channel that will have the recording of this call, as well as any of my past podcasts and webinar. I've done a lot of panels for the Business of Aesthetics Facebook group, and some webinars or podcast appearances as well, talking about all of the things we talked about today and lots of other things. But everyone who registered for the webinar will get that link to that recording tomorrow. Just do one before I wrap up. Oh, I did have people asking if there's any pros or cons to purchasing used versus new. I spent my entire career selling lasers as only new lasers. I've never sold used lasers. And so all of my training has been on convincing people not to buy a used laser. Now that I'm on the other side of it, I have to say that again, this is like individual. It's going to depend on every practice is going to be a little bit different, but I'm no longer 100% adamant against purchasing used devices. My caveat to that, though, is I don't mean buy a device from a med spa down the street that is going out of business and they put on Marketplace that they have a device. You do not know what condition that device is in. It's like buying a used car and not having, the report on if the service history or if it's been in an accident or anything like that. Now when you buy from there's a couple of excellent third party used laser guys that I work with that I like, and again I can send that to people in a one-off. That's going to be a little bit different. They're going to buy devices where they've inspected them. They have all the service or warranty histories on them. They're low pulsed, they're maybe low utilization, they're in excellent shape. They will come with a warranty through that third party manufacturer. Some of them have service technicians that travel to fix the device, just like if you had bought it from the manufacturer. Some of them have clinical trainers that will come out and train you just as if you were hired or you purchased from the manufacturer. The issue becomes, like I said, if you buy from Susie's Med Spa down the street that went out of business, you pay, I've had people tell me, oh, I bought that device for $50,000, which is great because, list price, it's $100,000 or $200,000. I saved all this money. What do I do now? Well, now you have to call the company because you don't know if the device works. So you have to have it serviced and or inspected. What that company doesn't tell you and what the person who sold to you didn't tell you is you're going to have to do what they call recertifying the device, which could be a charge of 25 grand, 15 grand. I mean, every company is a little bit different. Then they require you to buy an additional year of service. Now it's another $35,000 to $5,000 in terms of service. Oh, you have to buy a certification so that you can be listed on our provider locator, or you can only buy tips from us. So now we're going to charge you extra. So there's a lot of fees associated with doing it that way that is often not disclosed to the buyer. But like I said, there are some legitimate used brokers out there that I really like. And it could be a good way for someone to, purchase a device for a lower cost of ownership in the beginning. The only issue again is making sure that we can launch this treatment and be clinically confident without the help of those guys, because they might send you a clinical trainer and they might have someone that can service the device, but they are not equipped to help you be successful once you purchase this device. And then the last question was, how do you create SOPs, consents, and all of those things when you purchase a device if they don't come with it? No device companies will sometimes send you templates for consents. They'll be really generic. I much prefer customized consents to your state, to your scope of practice, etc. And then your standard operating procedures, standing orders, protocols, all of those things that are required from a compliance standpoint, they aren't going to include any of that. That is either your responsibility to contact your attorney to draft all of those for you to the tune of the cost of your firstborn or whatever it is that they charge. Or I do have those available in full binders for a fee that can be downloaded. So that's also, if you don't need anything else from me, but you would love something like a book of consents or protocols or standard operating procedures, that is something that as a consultant I do provide as well. So I'm going to conclude there. It is 7 o'clock. I appreciate everyone sticking with me for that hour. I know it's not always as fun to just listen to one person talk for the entire time as it is to have a panel discussion. But I do appreciate you for sticking with me and listening. Please know that my passion in this industry is to see all aesthetic practices succeed, especially in this kind of turbulent environment we're in with the industry right now. So at any point, if anyone on this call would like one of those strategy calls, would like to talk about whether it's purchasing a laser, clinical proficiency in your practice, operational efficacy in your practice, compliance, regulatory, marketing, any of the above, I would encourage you to reach out to me directly or book on the website, as I mentioned. So thank you so much, and I look forward to hearing from everybody. Have a good evening.